I don't know if you know this or not, but we weren't entirely raised by our parents. When I say we, I mean me and my big brother Chris. It's not that they didn't like having us around. They didn't mind, especially in the winter when we were either in school or asleep most of the day. But in the summertime, when them long summer days approached, they'd get a bit nervous. Their answer was to send us off to Granddad's place out in Montana. My grandpa had leased a great big ranch right smack dab in the middle of the Indian reservation. In fact, my brother and I were the only white kids within 25 miles. It's not that the Indians wouldn't play with us. They did. Particularly like to play cowboys and Indians. Their favorite variation was Custer's Last Stand. You know, I was 14 years old before I figured out getting beat up twice a day wasn't part of everybody's summer adventure. Of course, my brother was there to protect me, but not for long. He's 4 years older than me, and he was off on one of them Mormon missions. So I was on my own. I was big enough to handle most things, but or at least mean enough, but I was still lonely, and I wanted a best friend. Then it dawned on me I ought to have a dog. How many of you had a dog? Then you know there's no better friend than a dog. So I went to my grandpa. I said, "Granddad, can I have a dog?" He says, "Yeah, you can have a dog when you can pay for it." Okay, well that's a challenge. Well, I knew he wasn't going to pay me nothing. He figured that room and board was sufficient remunerations for any efforts I put in on chores, but Granny was different. She was willing to pay for little bits, and so I worked for her for 2 full weeks. In fact, I earned 75 cents. That's 10 nickels and a 2-bit piece. And then I headed down to the animal auction. How many have been to animal auction? Oh yeah, that's great fun. You sit up there in the bleachers and they send all the critters in order of importance. They start with the horses and then the cows and then the sheep and then the pigs. Whatever's left they push out in a pasteboard box right at the end. That day I went, it was just that way. Out comes this big box full of little yellow puppies. Of course, you know, if you mix all colors together, you get black. But you mix all dogs together, every breed, you're going to get yellow. And that was just the top of dog was in that pasteboard box. But it didn't matter to me, I just wanted one. Of course, there must have been a rush on farm dogs that day because it didn't matter how hard I tried. Every one of them puppies was gone until there was only one left. Of course, this time everyone in the room knew how much money I had, so when it got to 75 cents, there was nothing that auctioneer could do to get the price up, and I got that little guy. He's a cute little puppy. I named him Old Yeller, even though he wasn't old. I named him after a book I'd read. I took him home. I thought he's beautiful, but Granny thought he's ugly. But then I never thought Granny was that good looking. I guess if there'd have been more mirrors about the place, she'd have had greater empathy for the dog. She also thought he was stupid because he couldn't count. You know how horses count with their hoof up there, boom, boom, boom. Well, just because he couldn't do that, she thought he was dumb, but I knew he wasn't. In fact, I set out to prove so. I decided to train him as a hunting dog. Anyone here ever train a hunting dog? Yeah, then you know you cannot train a dumb dog. You cannot train a dumb animal. So, of course, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have any book, and I didn't have any training, but I figured out a way to do it on my own. It's a pretty good way. I'm glad to share it with you. I think it might pay off for you someday if you'd like to try. See, my granddad had a great big barn sitting up on top of a hill. Big long pasture sloping down toward the creek, toward the barbed wire fence down by the creek. Well, I took some wire and ran it from the top of that barn lot clear down to that barbed wire fence. Montana hay farm, believe me, there's plenty of wire. Then I cut cardboard silhouettes out of all kinds of animals, and birds too. Your raccoons, your minks, your muskrats, and your pheasants, your grouse, and your ducks. I mean, I took them all. And well, no hippopotamuses or rhinoceroses, of course. They're not to be found in Montana, but anything local. And I'd take that pile of silhouettes up there in the barn, and I'd hook them to that wire. Now, let me show you how to do this. For example, say I'd hook a silhouette of a duck to that wire. And I'd zing it down the wire and I'd yell, "Yeller, get that duck!" He'd run out there, jump up in the air, grab that right out there, marching around, his tail just a wagging, his chest all spread out. I'll tell you, he's so happy, he's so proud. But just to show you how smart he was. Say I was to attach the silhouette of an opossum. Now, you have to admit, in silhouette, An opossum looks an awful lot like a duck. I'd attach that opossum silhouette on there and I'd zing it down the wire and I'd yell, "Yeller, get that duck!" He'd run up there and he'd look at it as he'd go by and just shake his head. You see, he could tell the difference. Now that's a smart dog. Well, a few years went over. We had a great time all over the woods, chasing critters, having fun. But then I got thinking I ought to go on one of them Mormon missions. How many have heard of the Mormon church? Would you like to know more? Oh, sorry, just slipped out. It's the way I was brought up. It's the, the more good in all of us, I guess. But anyway, I went to my granddad and said, "Granddad, can I go on a mission?" He says, "Yeah, you can go on a mission when you can pay for it." Okay, well, I decided I'd start to earn some money, but I had to earn money that was in line with a job that set me to do the things I like to do, like being out in the woods and the wilderness and with my dog. So I decided to go into the fur trapping business. Any ever been in the fur trapping business? That isn't easy. It's a challenge. First of all, you got to peel the animal once you get it, and you can't just take that hide and throw it off there in the corner. No, it'll sour. The hair will slip. It ain't worth nothing. You got to put it down over a stretching board. Now, y'all seen a stretching board? Okay, it's kind of pointed at the top, and then it slopes long down the side, flat across the bottom. You take that point, you put it right in that critter's nose, and you just turn him right inside out over the top of that. Cut off the cartilage, tack it down, and let it dry. You don't need no salt or borax, you just let it dry. My granddad had a big round topped steamer trunk, and we'd put those hides in there, me and Yeller, until we got it full, and then we'd give it to Granddad. He'd take it to town and bring back the money. But I'll tell you, for every animal, you got to have a different size stretching board. All different species come in different sizes. For example, your muskrat, he's about that long, so your stretching board's about like that. It's pointed at the top, it slopes, it's long down the side and flat across the bottom. But for your mink, you got to have one about that long, but it's still pointed at the top, and it slopes long down the side and flat across the bottom. So I'll tell you how I got that trunk full of hides. I'd sit up there on the porch with a stack of them stretching boards. I'd seek through till I found the one I was most interested in, usually the mink, and I'd hold it up to old Yeller. I'd stroke his ears. He'd wag his tail. He's one of those dogs, when he wagged his tail, his whole body'd shake, and I'd show him that stretching board. He'd look up. He'd look down. He'd run down there off the porch. Pretty soon I'd see him down there by the creek or out there in the wood lot, but it wouldn't be long before he'd run right across the front of the property, chasing an animal just the right size to fit on that stretching board. I'd shoot it off the porch. He'd drag it up to me. We'd peel it out, head it for the round top. Well, 2 more years went by, and I had plenty of money. Must have done, because I went on that mission, I went to Japan. That's right. But the trouble is, when you get out on them missions, you get harrowed up in your sins. I was no different. What was harrowing me was the language. I just couldn't seem to master it. Of course, I thought back through my life to see what I might have done wrong to deserve that situation. And my life wasn't that exciting. All I'd done was raise money and raised a dog. But then it occurred to me where my problem was. All those years out on that ranch, I hadn't been the most helpful child. I hadn't done much service to Granddad and Grandma. So I made a deal with God. We Mormons, we call that a covenant. And this is what I said. I said, if you'll help me learn this language, I promise you, as soon as I get back to Montana, I will do anything Granny wants around that ranch, I promise. Well, it must have worked, because I learned the language, didn't I? In fact, 3 years later, I'm walking up towards that farmhouse, and who do you think's waiting there for me on the porch? Old Yeller. Oh, he really is old now. They say a dog puts on 7 years for every human year. It'd been 21 years since he saw me, but he remembered me well. His tail's a shaking, his body's a rattling. He's all great. I rubbed his ears, and then flomp, he goes down on the porch, and I went into my grandparents. Talk about killing your fatted calf. Boy, she had everything out there for me on that table. All the different meats and vegetables and breads, my land. And I was on my third piece of pie when suddenly it occurred to me that I'd made a covenant. And I turned to her and I said, Granny, is there anything about this ranch that I could do for you? At first she was a bit taken aback, but then you could tell she was pleased. She said, well, yeah, there is. Now, before I go any further, I have to explain to you that my granny did not iron the way your wives and sweethearts do, with them plug into the wall, steam squirting, light flashing, tip over, turn off jobs. She had 4 round discs that sat up on the back of the wood stove. When that wood stove was hot, so was her iron. She had a clamp would fit on each one. She'd pick up one and she'd iron on it till it got cool. Then she'd put it back and grab the next. By the time she had rotated through the next 3, that first one was ready to go again. But you did not take that iron right off the wood stove and put it right on Granddad's Sunday shirt. You'd cook a hole right through that puppy. So she'd been trying it out on the ironing board cover, and she'd scorched a lot of holes in that thing. She asked me if I'd recover her ironing board. Of course, I said I'd be glad to do it. It was a big ironing board. It was about 6 feet long, and it had to reach from the kitchen table over to the sideboard. Of course, you've all seen an ironing board. It's kind of pointed at the top, and then it slopes, and then it's long down the side and flat across the bottom. Well, I took that ironing board out on the porch, and I sat it down, thump. And that old dog, he looked up. He looked up. He looked down. He ran down off the porch. He turned around and come back. He looked up. He looked down. He ran down off that porch. You know, I've not seen that dog since. He's still somewhere in the backwoods of Montana, looking for an animal big enough to fit on that ironing board. No, that's the truth.